Today's speaker is Gail Mackiernan. She is by training a marine biologist, or more accurately, a biological oceanographer. Her area of expertise is the Chesapeake Bay, and she worked throughout her professional life on this estuary. While with the EPA Chesapeake Bay program, she co-authored the 2 definitive reports on the health of the bay and the necessary management actions. Later, as research director for the University of Maryland Sea Grant College, she oversaw studies in a wide range of disciplines from fisheries to biotechnology, all directed towards the bay and its ecology. She retired from the university in 1997. Gail started birdwatching seriously in high school, then took a break during grad school, only to revive her interest about 40 years ago. Since then, along with her husband, Barry Cooper, she has traveled to all 7 continents in search of birds. Tonight's talk is on the trip they took to Panama in 2019. And with that, Gail Mackiernan, you have the stage.
This is a trip I took with my husband and 2 friends from England in April of 2019, the last year before the pandemic shutdown of travel. So it's almost the last birding trip we've taken since then. We went at the end of the so-called green season, the wet season, but actually Panama had been experiencing a 6-week drought, so everything was quite dry. It also affected the operation of the Panama Canal. The participants are myself and my husband, Barry Cooper, as well as Tony Quinn and Peter Colston, who are from England. We visited the Canopy Tower, the Canopy Camp in the Darién, and Gunayala, which is an indigenous area to the north on the Caribbean coast. We stayed at facilities of the Canopy family, and I'll talk about that a little bit. Our guides throughout were Canopy guides, Carlos Bethencourt and Eleazar Madrid. The photographs in here are from the participants. Here are the, I guess these are our comrades in arms from left to right, Tony Quinn, myself, Peter Colston, and my husband, Barry Cooper. Peter Colston worked for 35 years in the bird room at Tring at the British Museum, and he's an ornithologist with 9 new species of birds for the world to his credit, some of them over a shotgun back in the old days. Here's a map of Panama. We think of Central America as going from north to south, but Panama, as you know, runs east to west to east or east to west. And the areas we visited were the Canopy Tower here and the Canopy Camp in the Darién, the far eastern province, and Gunayala up on the northern coast. This is the Pacific Ocean, and this is the Caribbean. The Canopy family is a series of lodges which was initiated by a Panamanian businessman, Raul Arias de Pará. He's a birder as well. The first one was a Canopy Tower. There is a Canopy Lodge to the west of the canal. The canal is here. And then the most recent is the Canopy Camp, which was opened in 2015. We had visited Panama earlier in 2002 and again in a lodge in 2007, but this was our first visit to the Darién. Just a quick look at some of the books. The one on the left, Robert Ridgely, is sort of the traditional guide. There's a new one, however, Princeton Field Guide, Birds of Central America, which has much better plates. So if you are going to Panama, you might want to pick it up, but it isn't a light book to lug around. So probably you'll want to have the Ridgely book as well. We started off at the famous Canopy Tower. Now, this was originally built in 1965 by the US Army as a radar installation, which is pretty obvious as a radar dome at the top. It was abandoned in the 80s when satellites came into use, and Raul purchased it in the 90s and converted it into an eco lodge. It sits in Soberania National Park on the top of Semaphore Hill. It's surrounded by about 65,000 acres of forest. Now, the Panama Canal depends on fresh water to operate. Every large ship that goes through the locks uses about 55 million gallons of water. And for that reason, the forest on either side of the canal is preserved as a watershed. So it's very good for wildlife. It's very good for birders. And it doesn't look, unless they abandon the canal, that it's ever going to get destroyed. If you go to the Canopy Tower, it's pretty luxurious, considering it's an old radar installation. The top floor is the dining and library. The stairs here go up to the top observation deck. Since it's a cylindrical structure, the rooms are pie-shaped. There's no need for air conditioning. There's a fan. There's even a heater. This is a heater here, and you can dry towels on it. It sometimes does get cold, and we've never needed air conditioning there. This is a regular room, or you can get a suite, which is about twice as large. So let's start at the beginning. You're there, you've flown into Panama City. You've been picked up at the airport by a driver from the Canopy Tower. He was taken to the tower probably in the late afternoon, maybe did a little bit of birding, had something to eat, went to bed, got up early and went up on the observation deck. You're looking east over the vast forest. And you have coffee, tea, biscuits there. Just at dawn, everybody's up at the top. This is our guide for most of the trip, Carlos Bethencourt. He's a senior guide at the Canopy Tower and is also part owner of the Canopy family lodges. In the background is Peter, Barry, and Tony. They've seen something interesting. Here we are, and they have these little like a balcony thing, and you can get out on that and almost touch the trees. Now, we went there first in 2002, not long after the Canopy Tower was opened, which was in 1999, and the trees had been cut back by the Army, and they really weren't that high, but now you can reach out and touch them, so you really are up in the canopy there. If you look west, you can see the canal. There's a large ship going through it. The first bird you're going to see is going to be a palm tanager, and they're so nosy or bold, they'll come in and take biscuit crumbs from your hand. You're going to start hearing the call of a yellowthroat up in the trees, and you're going to wonder, what the devil is a yellowthroat doing up in the trees? And you're going to realize it's not a yellowthroat at all, but a green shrike vireo. It has a very similar call. This is a large vireo, about the size of possibly, I would say maybe a robin or something like that, although much shorter tailed. And as you can imagine, if you weren't up in the canopy, you would not be seeing a bright green bird in a bright green tree. But here it is at arm's length. Another bird that you'll see up there, another canopy bird, is the broad-billed motmot, typical tropical family. And another extremely tiny bird that you would never see from the ground is the black-headed toady flycatcher. It's about the size of a kinglet. A tanager, common tanager, blue-gray tanager, again from this tower. Another tiny bird, this is a lesser greenlet, again, a little bigger than a kinglet. It's a very tiny vireo, also invisible from the ground. A true tanager, that is a Tangara tanager, is the aptly named plain colored tanager. It's probably the plainest Tangara tanager in the world. The male only has a tiny bit of blue right here. Otherwise, it's just white, gray, and black. Of course, you want to see really nice tropical birds like toucans, and this is a collared aracari. They go around in small groups and are very interested in the bananas that they put out every morning for the monkeys. And they also share them with the Jeffries tamarin, which will almost come in the window of the tower if they see some bananas on the table. Since it's up on a hill, on Semaphore Hill, in the late morning, you start to get thermals forming over the tower. And particularly during hawk migration, which is when we were there, we were in the spring hawk migration period. You'll see both local birds and also northern species winging their way north. This is a local gray-headed kite, but the most common migrant we saw the whole time we were there, a raptor migrant, was Mississippi kite. And we saw huge flocks of these. We even saw one flock in the Darién that we estimated to be about 6,000 Mississippi kites, which is an amazing thing. So here's a video of a typical kettle over the tower in the morning, and they'll kettle up and then eventually drift off and find another hill, and another kettle will come along, and this will go on all day. Of course, they have hummingbird feeders there, and these are at ground level. You could sit on benches and watch beautiful birds like this white-necked Jacobin, a blue-chested hummingbird, violet-bellied hummingbird, or white-vented pulmoleteer. This is a very large hummingbird and quite aggressive. It chases other birds off the feeders. And the road up to the tower is worth birding. It runs up the hill, of course. You walk down and walk up, or sometimes they drive you down and you walk up. We managed to find a pair of black and white owls roosting in some tangles. That's the best picture I could get, but at least you can see they are owls. So while you're there, they'll take you to a number of local sites, Old Gamboa Road and Summit Ponds, the Ammo Dump Ponds, and the famous Pipeline Road. En route to the Darién, they'll also take you to a place called Serra Azul. So we'll go visit these with you. Here's Soberania National Park, and the Canopy Tower is here. Old Gamboa Road, which is an abandoned road, is here. Summit Ponds, Ammo Dump Ponds, and this is the pipeline, famous Pipeline Road. Now, during World War II, the Army built a 12-mile-long pipeline from Gatun Lake down to Chagres, because they felt that during the war, the canal might be compromised, and it was to take fuel down to Panama City from here. But there was no problem with the canal during World War II, so the pipe was never used. However, the road is still maintained and it's used by tourists. So it's one of the really best birding roads in Latin America. Starting off, though, they take you to Gamboa Road, Old Gamboa Road, which is a secondary growth area where you see really nice birds like lance-tailed manakin. This is a male on his neck. Rosy thrush tanager, which is neither a thrush nor a tanager, but in its own family. And so if you want to see all the bird families of the world, you have to see this critter. They're extraordinarily bright colored, and they're extraordinarily difficult to see. There are no corvids in Panama, but I shouldn't say that. There are no crows in Panama, but there are corvids and a number of different species of jay. This is one of the nice ones, the black-chested jay, and they go around in small groups making jay-like noises and poking their bills into everything. A common bird, a beautiful songster, is the clay-colored thrush or clay-colored robin. And if you went birding in Texas 20 years ago, this would have been a big rarity, but now they've spread north so much that they're all over the lower Rio Grande Valley and not difficult to see at all. We did see mammals. This is the only picture I managed to get of a two-toed sloth. It was quite high in a tree, and it didn't listen to our entreaties for it to turn around so we could see its face. So this is what you get: a large hairy lump. This is the tail and this is the head. Summit Ponds is a beautifully quiet, still lagoon where you look for birds such as boat-billed heron. As you can see, they're related to night herons, but even more nocturnal with those huge eyes. American pygmy kingfisher, a greater ani, which is about half again as big as the anis you may have seen in Texas. And lesser Kiskadee, there's a large colony there and much less noisy and much more demure, I should say, than their cousins in Texas. But now we're off to the Pipeline Road. To do that, you drive right along the canal, and it's a container ship and a cruise ship going through, accompanied by tugs. All along the way, tropical kingbirds, or TKs as they're called, sit on the wires and on the branches. We'll stop briefly at ammo dump ponds where they did store ammunition during World War II. The amount of water in these ponds varies. The first time we went, it was quite low and it was easy to see some of the birds, including some rails and crakes. But this time the water was high, and the only thing of real interest we managed to see was some purple gallinables. But there they are, very nice. So we're going to the Parque Nacional Soberania, and there's some discussion about whether there's an accent on that I or not. So half the literature has it and half doesn't, so it depends on how you want to pronounce it. It is gated, but that doesn't stop bicyclists from going in, and some motorcyclists too, and that has caused a bit of a problem. Anyway, this is how they carry you at the Canopy Tower. They have these Toyota trucks. The back has been made into an open area with bench seating facing left and right. Then you drive along, keeping your eyes open for interesting birds. If you see anything that the driver misses, who's your guide, you just bang on the roof of the truck and he stops. And you get out and look at it. This is primary forest, and it has a lot of these super emergent trees like this giant fig tree. And we'll see a lot of birds that are associated with primary forest. For example, black-chested puffbird, which is quite a rare bird, but we managed this time to see one almost at our first stop. This is let's see which of our, I always have to look these up because what we have is we have two different trogons. This is black-throated trogon. It's a green and yellow trogon. And next one is violaceus, which is a purple and yellow trogon. And I would say that the Pipeline Road is one of the best roads I've ever been on for seeing trogons. I think there's like 6 or 7 species in Panama, and I have, on our first visit we ever did to this road, I think we saw every species in one trip. Cute little white whiskered puffbirds. It's a male and a female. Great, Rufus motmot, which is like the broadbill motmot, but half again as big. Great jacamar. Jacamars are insectivorous birds, but these large ones also take small mammals and lizards and things like that, frogs. They're all very typical glossy green and reddish jacamars. The lineated woodpecker is in the same genus as the pileated woodpecker. It has a very similar lifestyle and a similar size. But of course, you're very interested in birds associated with the forest floor in these primary forests, including all the ant things, you know, antpittas and ant shrikes and ant birds. This is a slaty ant shrike, male, and a black-hooded ant shrike, male. The females are actually more interesting insofar as they're usually dark brown or black on the back and with a nice rufous breast. A very cute little flycatcher is the southern bentbill. That's pretty well named. Now, we did have some problems, though. I said we had a drought, and the drought interfered with one of the things we had been looking forward to, and that was these army ant swarms. Army ant swarms are magnet for ant following birds. I guess if you know about the obligate ant birds, they don't eat the ants, but they follow the swarms so that they eat the organisms that are flushed by the ants and So every time an ant swarm is sighted, you'll hear these ringing calls of the various ant birds, and they're sort of calling everybody to the feast, and they'll follow the swarm all day as long as it's active. Well, we couldn't, because it was so dry, we simply could not find any ant swarms. And after the third day, our friends from England were getting pretty depressed because these are the birds they really wanted to see. And on the last day they were there, a guide from another tour company came running up to Carlos and said, "I've found a tiny ant swarm in the forest and it's got antbirds with it." So we beat our way into the bush and we did find an ant swarm. This is Eciton burchelli, is the ant, army ant that you see in Panama. This is a soldier ant, and this is one of the workers, and this is some poor victim being carried away back to the nest, which is a bivouac, and usually in the roots of a palm tree, where they'll feed the young until they're large enough to follow the swarm, and then the swarm will abandon the bivouac and move to another site. So they have this nomadic existence almost. So anyway, the first thing that happens is you get these gray-hooded tanagers. Notice this one is banded, which are obviously not ant birds, but they are an obligate ant bird, and they follow ant swarms, and they have loud calls, and they start calling the ant birds, which start coming in, like bicolored ant bird, spotted ant bird, and the one we all wanted to see was ocellated antbird, which is quite a remarkable creature. They think the bare skin around the eyes is to protect the eye or the area around the eye from the bites of the ants. I'm not sure about that, but that's the theory. Anyway, we also went along the road and saw a number of nice birds like gray-chested dove and spectacled antpitta, right, feeding along the road just like a thrush, and managed to see a few mammals like a coatimundi, a three-toed sloth. This is a male. They have a large bare skin area on the back. That's how you tell males from females. Quite a few monkeys, of course, white-faced capuchin monkeys, and mantled howler monkeys, a female with a baby, of course. And these will wake you up in the morning at the Canopy Tower. You'll hear what sounds just before dawn, a distant wind blowing in the trees, and it's the howling of these monkeys in concert at a distance, proclaiming their territory. Here are some other interesting ants that you'll see are, of course, the leafcutter ants, and quite amusing to watch them carrying their bits of leaf into the nests. And as you know, these leaves are not eaten by the ant, but are chewed up and used as a base for the fungus that the ants do feed on. They have very large nests. They can be 20 feet in diameter, bare area, cleared on the forest floor with many, many little holes for the ants to go in and out. Just a few of the little vegetation things. This is a monkey comb seed pod. The monkeys are supposed to use it to smooth their fur. It's rather stiff and bristly. This is a seed pod of the most important tree in many parts of Panama. It's a giant forest emergent called the quipo. It looks very much like a ceiba tree, but it's not related. And it has seeds that are dispersed by the wind, as you could see. So anyway, after 2.5 days at the tower, we left to head south, or not south, but east and south to the Darién. And on way, we stopped at Serra Azul. Now, Serra Azul is a private area. You have to go through a gate with a guard. There are many homes up there of wealthy businessmen, expat Americans or Europeans. But at the very top, they have a nice refuge. And we did bird there for a couple of hours with a little issue with rain. As you might notice, it's raining up here. But we did see some nice birds, such as golden hooded tanager and spotted wood creeper. But we couldn't stay too long because we didn't want to miss the pièce de résistance of going to Serra Azul. And it's a visit to the home of the Harrisons. And Dr. Harrison are expat Americans that from Indiana that now live in Panama, and they have the most remarkable setup of feeders that I've ever seen, private feeders. You can see they're all labeled. I'll just show you. You're trying to look at all these birds at once, and it is maddening to try and keep up with them, but it gives you an idea of what it's like. Now, which bird is on which feeder and which feeder has which species and so on and so forth. So there you are. So we spent about an hour or so here, and we saw some really nice birds, such as this crowned wood nymph, bronze-tailed pummelatier, snowy-bellied hummingbird, and then they have fruit feeders. So you're going to see all these lovely fruit-eating birds, such as the green honeycreeper. There's no green honeycreeper in this picture. There's red-legged honeycreepers and a crimson-back tanager, shining honeycreeper, male and female, another red-legged honeycreeper, male. That's a green honeycreeper, male. Bay-headed tanager, also coming into the fruit. So anyway, we leave, bid the Harrisons adieu. We're heading east to the Darién. We stop at a restaurant, a famous restaurant in a town called Totai, and all the birding groups stop there because it has hummingbird feeders. And you'll see species there you won't see anywhere else, like black-breasted mango and scaly-breasted hummingbird. But eventually you arrive at the Canopy Camp. Now the Canopy Camp is like these tented camps that you may have stayed in Africa or read about in any case. This dining area, relaxation area, and so forth. But you yourself are in a tent, and this is our tent. You have a nice deck. Off to the left is a separate small building with hot showers, toilets, flush toilets, and everything. All the mod cons, as they say in England. This is the inside of the tent before we messed it up with our dirty boots and all our stuff. From the deck, you look out. This is a quipo, so as you can see, it's a big super emergent tree that looks a little bit like a ceiba, and it's it's in its winter now, so none of them have any leaves. And we saw some nice birds from our deck, like keel-billed toucan, thick-billed euphonia, and long-billed starthroat. So while we were there, we visited a couple of local villages, Alto Playona and Nuevo Vigia. And then we went to the Darién National Park, to the foothills of Cerro Pire, and then a local area called El Salto, which is an abandoned road area. I'll explain about that later.
Hey, Gail, can I interrupt for a second? There's a
Yeah.
question from Nancy. Did you use one of the package tours, or did you do things on your own?
Oh, that's a very good question. There is absolutely and positively no need to do a package tour when you go to any of the Canopy facilities. Their guides are excellent. It's a all-inclusive. So if you go on their website and you get an 8-day package, that includes everything. So you don't need to go with Vent or field guides or anything like that. I mean, that when you say you don't do things on your own per se, you can, I guess. I'm sure there are people who are tremendously experienced and would prefer to just drive up and do their own thing and stay there. But everybody we saw was there and being guided by their own guides there. We weren't there for any of the tour companies, and they do go there and they add a big surcharge, which as far as I'm concerned is just useless. Now, if you wanted to, let me just show you this map here. The Canopy Camp is here, and there's a very large forest reserve here, and then down, this is it. And then this is the Darién National Park, which is contiguous with Los Cactillos, a national park in Colombia. So this is the famous This is the Colombian border. This is the Inter-American Highway. It ends at Yavitsa. And here's the famous Darién Gap. The highway doesn't start down off the map here. If you went to the Darién 15 years ago, you would have flown into a place called Cana around here, and you would have birded around Sarapire. Now that facility, which was run by ANCON, which is their Natural Resources Agency of Panama, is now closed for security reasons. And I'm not sure, I did get in touch with them, and they sort of waffled as to why it was closed, but I got the impression that they're having issues with people crossing the Darién Gap. I'll talk about that a little later because we actually experienced that, and people using it as a means of transporting drugs from Colombia into Panama. And it wasn't really that safe to be just sleeping out in this particular area. So we're up here, and they'll take you down here for other things. Does that answer your question? I guess so. Okay, onward.
Yes,
Yeah.
onward.
Yeah. So anyway, here we are at the Canopy Camp. So the first day we go to Alta Playona village, and we're going to see the nest of a crested eagle. Now, crested eagle is the second largest raptor in the Americas, and the same type of eagle as the harpy. It's a forest monkey-eating, mammal-eating eagle, and second in size, as I said, to the harpy, much rarer. And this is really the reason we wanted, one of the reasons we wanted to go, because we'd been to South America and Central America many times and never had seen crested eagle. So anyway, the way they're working it now is the Canopy Camp has all the local villages and local people looking for eagle nests. And once located, local guides are hired to take you in. The village gets a surcharge. You pay a little bit to them. Everybody on the trip pays a little bit and for the use. And so here we are. Here's our local guide with his machete and his expensive binoculars. And as you get close to the nest of the crested eagle, they have a sign warning you of many things. Don't throw basura, no playback, and we're watching you with cameras. And so onward we walk. We had been warned when we got that the chick was large, it was ready to fledge, and we wouldn't expect to see the adult because at that point in time, they only come in every other day or so to feed the chick. They're trying to get it to become independent. And so we should see the chick, but the chance of us seeing an adult was small. But we were happy with seeing the large chick. So onward we go. On way, we see a bicolor, semi-plumbeous hawk, a really beautiful bird, and gave us a good look just sitting up there. That's a forest buteo. So we arrive at the nest, and Carlos is setting up the scope, and we're getting our cameras ready, and there's nothing on the nest. It's a nest. This is why we walked in, but we said, well, we'll wait a while and just see what happens. And it was good that we waited, because in about 20 minutes, the chick flies in and lands in the nest. And so we get to see it. The chicks are white, as are the chicks of the harpy. You can see it's got a single crest here, and it's full grown, and it's probably doing some hunting on its own, which is why it wasn't at the nest the first time. But he's there. He called quite a bit. He was hoping that mom would come and feed him a nice kinkajou or something, but she didn't appear while we were there. So that was that. So anyway, we're walking back, and we arrive at our truck at the end of the trail, and we see all these people walking up the road. And the first one who sees us asks us if we speak French, which is something you expect in the middle of Panama, or actually in the middle of the Darién. Also, it was obvious that these people were from Africa. And we did speak to them. The children had all learned Spanish. Many of them had been on the road for a couple of months. And it turns out they were from Africa. Most of them were from either Congo, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, a few from Gabon, some from Eritrea and Nigeria. And they take boats. They had taken boats from Africa to Brazil or to Colombia and had made their way to the Colombian border, where they had hired coyotes to set them or get them on their way across the Darién Gap. And if you followed any of it in the last, this is 2019, last few years, you'll know that a lot of them don't make it. And we saw almost entirely women with children and, young people and so forth. Nobody looked very suspicious, but they all looked very tired. Anyway, when they get to the local village, the Panamanian authorities were rounding them up and, taking names, looking at papers, giving them a brief medical checkup, giving them some food, and putting them on buses to Costa Rica. So we have no idea what happened when they got to Costa Rica. And as soon as the pandemic hit, this all shut down. So there are, I believe, maybe not so much now, but at one point, thousands of African migrants and migrants from South America being held in Panama in camps. So it was sort of a firsthand taste of this international, really, migration. None of these were people from Central America. It was just much further south than the people coming from Guatemala and El Salvador. So anyway, they're on their sites to either get to the United States or at least to get out of Panama. So I don't know how many made it, but it was very much eye-opening. Anyway, the next day we visited another village, Nueva Vieja, and we did some birding around the village. Saw this bare-crowned antbird, a very strange looking creature, and red-billed scythebill, a very impressive wood creeper. In the village, gray-breasted martins breed. But our real goal was to get on one of these canoes and drift down river, because we were going to this abandoned plantation where there were a number of rare or endemics found only in this part of Panama and in Colombia. So we get into the canoe and we start going downstream on the river. It was very pleasant. Such things as wattled chacana, ringed kingfisher, which is the same species you may have seen in Texas, gray-barred hawk, Savannah hawk, rufous tiger heron, rufescent tiger heron, excuse me, black-capped Donychobius. Now, Donychobius is an interesting species. It was originally put with the mimid thrushes, and then it was moved to the wrens, and now it's in its own family. So it's the only species in its family. So again, if you want to see all the families in the world, you got to see black-capped Donychobius, and it's quite a remarkable thing. We never saw one do the display, but I've seen them do it in Peru. The two adults sit side by side, and they flare their tails, and they wag them back and forth, and they make this very strange, amazing call, and quite amusing, actually. Royal flycatcher, we couldn't get it to put its crest up, unfortunately. Mangrove swallow, very common. And this is a gray basilisk lizard, or the Jesus Christ lizard. It's the one that if you frighten it, it runs across the water. Has very large hind feet, and it moves very fast and uses the surface tension of the water. We made all sorts of noises and waved our arms, and this thing just looked at us. And so we never did see it run across the water. Anyway, we get to the plantation, a lot of dying avocado trees and so forth, I guess from the drought. But we did see our targets, gray-cheeked nunlet, which is quite a rare bird, only found here. No, excuse me. I keep saying this is gray-cheeked nunlet. This is dusky jacamar. Forgive me. Dusky jacamar. It's only found here and in the northern part of Colombia. It's got quite a bill. Spot-breasted woodpecker, again, a Colombian species, found a bit in the Darién. But the big day is the next day. This is the day that we're all going to go see the Harpy Eagle. And as Joe mentioned, or Joe Corcoran mentioned earlier when we were chatting, they always know where there's an eagle nest, and they make arrangements with the local people if it's on private land, or in the national park if it's in the national park. Now, this particular nest was in the national park. It was actually on the foothills of Cerro Pire. So we're going to be making that trek. It's a trek that people make that bird Cerro Pire now. At the top of the mountain, there's a number of endemics that are found nowhere else. I think Peter Kessner did it recently, and you can make arrangements through the Canopy Camp to hire the expert guide for that area, and they'll take you there and he'll take you up. You have to camp several nights. We did not do it. In fact, I was talking to Raul the other day by email, and he said he thought he was too old to do it too. Anyway, you go downstream from Yavitsa, the end of the Inter-American Highway, by canoe on one river, and then up another river to the little town of El Real, which is the jumping off spot for the Darién National Park. You disembark, you get put on a truck, and get driven to the beginning of the trail up to Cerro Pire. We have breakfast in the field, cross that stream behind on some stepping stones, and start the hike up to the Harpy Eagle area. I think we hiked for about an hour or so. We came to this sign, "Be quiet, Harpy Eagle nesting area." So we waited here, and we had been warned, just as with the Crested Eagle, that probably only the chick would be at the nest, because the parents, again, it was a large chick, were only coming in about every other day to feed it. So we're waiting, and the guides, there were three guides with us, because it was three groups together, came running back, and they said, "Hurry, hurry. The female is at the nest feeding the chick. So you want to see the adult." So off we go, and we hurry. And we come to, in the distance is this huge quipo tree. And in the middle of the huge quipo tree is a huge nest. In the middle of the huge nest are two huge birds. So this is our first glimpse. They have a little blind, but you don't really need it. If you're quiet and move slowly, the birds really ignore you totally. The female was feeding the chick kinkajo, which is a relative of the raccoon. It's an arboreal mammal. And the chick was screaming every time she fed it a piece of meat. It would wolf it down and then start screaming for more, waving its wings. So it was a pretty vocal thing. See, if she feeds it, and it mantles the food just like it would if it was a killed prey. I have a little video here. It's not the best quality because it's shot with an iPhone through a scope, but it'll give you the idea. And for some reason, the sound isn't working, but oh, you can see it anyway. And this is not a good picture, but it's the only picture someone got of with their point and shoot camera of the eagle suddenly flew away over us. And I took a photo of the back of their camera. So again, it's not a good picture, but I wanted you to see the size of those feet and talons. The size of the wrist of a female Harpy Eagle is about the size of a human wrist. So this is a very large and powerful bird. On the way back, we did see finally, this is a gray cheeked nunlet, which is a puff bird. And another bird that we were looking for, which we saw on the way back, is another Colombian endemic, which not endemic really, a Colombian bird, which makes its way into the Darién just in a little bit in this part of Panama. Black oripendula. As you know, oripendulas are relatives of orioles. And so they build similar hanging nests, but they do it in colonies, and they're very big nests. So this is the nest, and this is the oripendula. And an oripendula is the size of a fish crow. So it's a big bird with a big nest. Another bird we saw at the same time was red-throated caracara, which is a falcon relative, but a scavenger, a carrion eater. I don't have a picture of how tired we were that evening. I do have that picture somewhere. I should put it in this program. Everybody's drooping in their chair. But the next day we were invigorated, and off we go to the final, next to the final day. We're going to Quebrada Felix, which means lucky stream, or Quebrada is the smallest stream. And it's a trail that yields some very nice birds. On the way, it's sort of hilly there. Of course, you're near Cerro Prairie. All these Aquipo trees, and they're all in just their autumnal or winter leaflessness. But this is the trunk of Aquipo, and it's supposed to look like the foot of an elephant. They don't have buttress roots like ceiba trees, but it's, I thought, quite a remarkable looking trunk. Anyway, en route, a beautiful white hawk, a crested or a pendula making its display. They lean forward and make a noise that sounds very much like a jug being water being poured from a jug, a gurgling note. White-tailed trogon. I know somebody said, well, he's not showing his white tail. And I said, well, I'm sorry. We asked him, but he wouldn't turn around. So just trust me, it's a white-tailed trogon. Oh, they're called white-tailed because the whole underside of the tail is pure white. It doesn't have barring like all other trogons do, or almost all other trogons. A whooping mott-mott. It's a split from turquoise-browed mott-mott, which you might have seen elsewhere in Central America, maybe. I think it's a very strange name. We never heard it whoop, but that's the name, and it stuck with it. Another poorly named bird, at least the ones in this part of Panama, this is a flame-rumped tanager. In some parts of its range, the rump is actually red, but in Panama it's yellow. So why it's called flame-rumped, I'm not sure. It's probably a split. Anyway, here we are at Quebrada Felix, the little stream running here. We had a couple of northern water thrushes here, which we thought was quite nice. And our guide now is Eleazar Madrid, and he's playing his iPhone to try to bring in our target. And we're so engrossed in looking for that bird as we had two little tinamous, which are birds you never see, you just hear, walk right in front of us like this, and nobody had the presence of mind to take a photograph. Anyway, this is the bird we were looking for. This is Black-crowned Pitosoma, or Black-crowned Antpitta, but genetic analysis in the last couple of years have shown it's not an Antpitta at all. It's most closely related to the gnatcatchers, and probably it and the rufous-crowned ant Pitosoma in Colombia should be in their own family. So again, I'm trying to see all the bird families in the world, so I wanted to see this one to put it in the bank. This bird was so tame, he just came right up to us. And this, to show you how close he came, that's an iPhone photo. And there he is again, just looking at us. They don't eat worms and stuff like antpittas. They eat large insects, such as locusts or crickets, and also small mammals and lizards. That evening, having seen our Pitosoma, we went to a place to try and see great curassow. Now, this is an interesting place. A woman had inherited this property 45 years ago. It was, I think it's 15 hectares. It's about 30 acres. And she didn't do anything with it. It had been a farm, had nothing growing on it. She just let the forest regrow. So in 45 years, it's regenerated into a very nice, albeit not primary, a very nice forest where we saw birds like common patoo, purple-throated fruit crow, a black ant shrike, which is a very rare bird, very hard to see. But we only had the briefest glimpses of a great curassow, so that didn't work out too well. But nevertheless, it was quite interesting to see how much regrowth there was in just 45 years. The last full day there, we went to El Salto, which is quite a long road that runs from the Inter-American Highway all the way down to an old abandoned port on a river. And it's secondary forest mostly. There's a few homes there, that's why the wires are there, but we didn't see anybody the whole day. Pied puff bird, roadside hawk, more open country birds we're seeing here. It's a fairly low trees. Fork-tailed flycatcher. And on the way back, this was, as I said, the end of our trip. We only had a few more days in Panama. We were pretty tired. We're all sleepy and drooping in the truck, and Eleazar is driving, and we're just sort of, half dozing. And suddenly he jams on the brakes and he says, "I saw a big raptor sitting in a tree by the road. Let's get out. Don't slam the door of the truck, and we'll just walk back very quietly and see what's there." And so we did, and there was a crested eagle, female crested eagle, black phase, which is the rarest phase, sitting 10 feet off the ground and 20 feet from the road. And we looked at her and she looked at us, and we looked at her and she looked at us for about maybe 15 minutes, and then she just up and flew away. So this was one of the best birds of the whole trip, and it was completely serendipitous. Just wanted to show this. This is a centralobium, and it looks like a weaponized maple seed pod, but the funny story is that it has beautiful yellow flowers that look like locust flowers, only bright yellow, and beautiful leafy foliage. So they planted a lot of them in some of the towns in Panama, and then discovered in the autumn that the streets and sidewalks and lawns were filled with these lethal weapons. So no flip-flops could be worn where they planted centralobiums. Another interesting plant for the botanists, the spaghetti palm blossom, well named. I did want to mention that despite the fact that there's a national park there, and most of the indigenous communities are very good about preserving their habitat, there is a fair amount of slash and burn agriculture still going on. And we did pass areas where things had been cleared and recently burned. And because it had been so dry, there was quite a bit of forest fires going on. And they weren't big roaring fires like you're seeing out west. They're more smoldering, creeping along. But when we drove out of the Darién up north, we went for about 2 hours through this sort of smoke. So it was a little disheartening. Anyway, the last stop for birding was Gunayala, which is, as I said, a Kuna Indian. This is sort of almost an enclave. You have to show your passport to go in there. We stayed at Yarduk Lodge, which is very adequate, very much like the lodges you might have stayed in South America and so forth. It's ensuite bathrooms. They serve food there. It's run by a Kuna Indian family. Yarosol Adamas and her mother run it. It's a very comfortable place. We stayed there just 2 nights, and we had a couple of targets here. These were on the Sendero Iba Igar, which is an infamous trail that goes straight down and straight up. We still had Eleazar with us, so he took us. And here we are going straight down. And we also went straight up and up and down and up and down. And then finally, there's Eleazar carrying our scope, thankfully. We come across the bird we're looking for. This is the Sapayoa. Now, I don't know if people are into the families of the world, bird families of the world, but this is a very interesting bird. It doesn't look like much. It's about the size of a small, rather bulky flycatcher, about the size maybe of a wood pewee, and it looks like a flycatcher with that broad bill. It was initially put in with the flycatchers, the Tyrannidae, and then they said, no, it isn't a flycatcher. It's a mannequin. So they had it in with the mannequins. And even in the old books, you'll see it listed as green mannequin or olive mannequin. And then with modern genetics, they've done genetic analysis on it, and they've discovered that its closest relatives are the broadbills of Asia and Africa. So it is a broadbill. So what a broadbill is doing, which is an old world family, actually 2 old world families, is doing in Panama. It's only found in Panama and a few other places in the world. Who knows, but we saw it. And we saw a few other nice birds, blue-fronted parrotlet, rufous-winged tanager, which had been a blocker for me for years. Never been able to see one, and finally I saw a couple there, so I was quite happy. Rufous mourner, which is a true flycatcher. It's about the size, bigger, I guess, than a great crested, but similar shape. A breeding bird there, this isn't a migrant, are these beautiful swallowtail kites breed in the open country. The Guna Indians are the ones that do that reverse applique molas, which you may have seen or you may have even bought if you've been to Panama. These were all done by Yarasol's mother. And because we hope to see this bird on our last day, we bought it, and that's a rufous vented ground cuckoo. Here is Yarasol's mom in her Guna Indian traditional clothing, holding her mola that she made, and I have it upstairs in our living room now. So we arrived late in the evening at the Canopy Tower, and the plan was the next day, Carlos was going to take us to the Canopy Lodge. Remember, that's to the west of the canal. It's about a 2-hour drive because they have been seeing one of these rufous vented ground cuckoos regularly there. And he thought even with just one day, we had a very good chance of seeing it. Now, Barry and I had seen him years and years ago in Panama, but Tony and Peter had not. So this was going to be a big highlight for them. And when we arrived, we got a little bit of a sad news that Carlos, if you've been to the Canopy Tower, you go up the various, there's no elevator, you go up the various floors by this sort of circular metal staircase. And there are signs everywhere. Hold on to the banister, the stairs are slippery, hold on to the railing, do not, whatever. Carlos wasn't paying any attention to those signs, and he fell on the stairs and broke his leg. So here we were with a broken-legged guide. He couldn't take us anywhere. So the next day we spent at the Canopy. We spent on the Pipeline Road. Another group graciously let us join them. And that was fine. We saw golden wing warblers and a lot of North American migrants, which were sort of getting ready to go north. But we missed our ground cuckoo. But anyway, the last day on the tower, the next morning, Tony and Peter are ready to go. We had a nice passage of Swainson's hawks over Semaphore Hill, maybe 200 or 300 of them circling around in the early dawn. We saw our last red-legged honey creeper, our last green honey creeper. And then we saw in the distance, distant tree, a scarlet tanager telling us it was time to go back north and see the tanagers in their breeding area. So we did. That's it.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you very much for sharing your adventure with us, Gail.